Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
With the permission of the body, I move to consider House Bill 6215 under Committee Report 167.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, House Bill number 6215 under Committee Report 167 is now under consideration.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary, please do so.
An act appropriating funds for the operation of the Government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2018, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Chairman of the Committee on Finance, Senator Loren Legarda, be recognized.
Our Chairman of the Committee on Finance, Senator Loren Legarda, is hereby recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Esteemed colleagues in the Senate, Secretary Sonny Dominguez, Secretary Ben Diokno, colleagues in government, I humbly rise to present to you the 2018 General Appropriations Bill under Senate Committee on Finance Report number 167. This is an honor I am truly mindful about and for which I am deeply appreciative, for it is you, my distinguished colleagues, who reposed on this humble representation the trust to sponsor for the last 3 years this most important piece of legislation that we, as a collegial and independent institution, have to enact into law. It is for this reason that, as chairperson of the Senate Committee on Finance, I am happy to report to you that our task mandated by Section 24, Article 6 of the Constitution, and I quote, which is to propose or concur with amendments as regards the national budget for fiscal year 2018, is almost complete. It is now ready for plenary discussion and the approval of our colleagues. But before I go to the heart of the matter, please allow this representation to put into context the diligence, the passion, the very hard work, if you may, that your Committee on Finance has poured into 48 budget hearings, 10 technical working group meetings, numerous budget briefings up to yesterday late afternoon, and a comprehensive discussion at the Development Budget Coordinating Committee, or DBCC level, to assemble the 2018 national budget that I am about to present. Mr. President, there is one real and poignant encounter during one of the public hearings on the 2018 national budget. It happened last September 14, when the Executive Director of the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, or I think she's the chair, Leonor Oralde Quintayo, waxed emotional when your committee, upon the motions of Senators Juan Miguel Zubiri and Sherwin Gatchalian, approved the restoration of the NCIP's budget, which the House of Representatives had reduced to only 1,000 pesos, together with the budget of an important constitutional body, the Commission on Human Rights. The significance of the moment was not lost to the NCIP officials, because during the hearing, members of your committee took turns in chastising them for the apparent lack of seriousness in their work. This representation herself rebuked the agency for its monumental failure, not only in defending the rights of our 14 million indigenous peoples, but also in promoting indigenous culture and knowledge. An agency, I said, that does not have the drive and the passion to preserve IP culture and heritage needs a rap in the head to wake it up from the stupor. This was what the House of Representatives did by defunding the NCIP. Still fresh in my mind was the seemingly unabated and yet unsolved killings of Lumad leaders allegedly by paramilitary forces years ago. I can remember a few of them, like Emerito Samarca, head teacher of an award-winning Lumad school in Lianga, Surigao del Sur, and Dionel Campos and Juvelo Sinzo. These, as well as many other crimes buried and forgotten as statistics, are as repugnant as the admission by the NCIP top official that the incidence of poverty in the country remains high among IPs. As to what extent the NCIP did not say, But if we juxtapose the IP situation vis-a-vis the 21.9 million Filipinos who were considered poor in 2015, then what I just related speaks about the whole story of the 2018 General Appropriations Bill and its supreme importance and primacy to our national life. The 2018 General Appropriations Bill is a national expenditure program touted by the administration of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte to bring about inequality-reducing transformation or pagbabago. A budget seeking to enhance the social fabric or malasakit, one that will increase a country's growth potential or patuloy na pag-uunlad, and an expenditure program that seeks to maintain the foundations for sustainable development. Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, it is against these benchmarks that your committee examined the 2018 GAB. However, the overriding constant that guided us in proposing refinements in the national budget proposal touches the very core of the question. And I ask, will this budget affect real change among those who genuinely need the government's preferential care and support? The 21.9 million poor Filipinos are farmers, fisherfolks, children, self-employed and unpaid family workers, women, youth, migrant and formal sector workers, senior citizens, the differently abled, the urban residents who are unaffected by and oblivious to the rhetoric, the bureaucratic turf battle sometimes, the corruption, and the fake news breaking every single day. These basic sectors may not even know that the 3.767 trillion pesos the government is asking the Senate and the House to enact into a law is actually a deficit budget, meaning that disbursements to support this budget will total 3.364 trillion pesos, part of it, or 523.568 billion pesos, will be financed by borrowings, of which 80% will come from local sources and 20% from international lenders. They may not even know, but will undoubtedly worry if they do, that the bulk, or 84% of the total disbursements will be sourced from both tax and non-tax revenues amounting to 2.841 trillion pesos. And what of the poor? Will they, as we do, rage righteously that the Bureau of Customs, which had lately sunk lower than low in credibility, is to collect only 637.1 billion pesos in 2018, plus or minus the 165.5 billion pesos in tariff revenues, to be lost due to smuggling? Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the serious work your committee invested in fine-tuning the 2018 General Appropriations Bill has resulted in a budget that considered the wishes of the executive branch, yet reflective of what we, who, like the President, have a national constituency, feel daily as we keep in touch with the pulse of the people. This pulse beats no farther than the steel gates of this Senate, where every single day, even during weekends, hundreds, if not thousands, of our fellow Filipinos from the lowest strata of society line up to avail of, nay, beg for, whatever assistance is available from the offices of the members of this hallowed institution. A stark reality, that is, the legislative branch of government being a refuge of the poor, because some, just some, agencies in the bureaucracy are sometimes perceived to be insensitive or unreachable, or sometimes failing to attend to their needs. We want to help address the challenges that hinder agencies from fully utilizing their budget. Dahil sa pondo na binabalik sa kaban ng bayan, katumbas noon ang mga classroom na hindi na ipapatayo, mga kalsadang hindi nasimulan o nabuo, mga batang hindi nabigyan ng sapat na nutrisyon, mga pamilyang patuloy na naninirahan sa kalsada, mga komunidad na walang ilaw at tubig, at iba pang mga proyektong hindi na ipapatupad. Faced with this grimmest of these realities, your committee thus fashioned a budget that we believe will translate the soaring rhetoric of our leaders into something really solid, into something firmly rooted on the ground that our people can hold on to and hope. It is a budget that reforms and transforms, to borrow the President's message. It is also a budget trimmed of the lavish and therefore unneeded decorative furniture in a house meant for 104.9 million, but which unfortunately accommodates only a few. It means a budget that addresses the basics. It is a budget where we made room and space to keep those who are in the cold warm, to feed those who are hungry and dispossessed. A budget that reduces enmity and restores the peace. A budget that is transparent. Such a budget, your committee believes, will bring the Filipino family tranquility, prosperity, and unity. We believe it should ignite hope, which is a dwindling currency in these pessimistic times. We also believe it is a crucial tool to finally break the cycle of intergenerational poverty and to promote inclusive economic growth for all Filipinos. To reduce inequality, we at the committee level supported many of the proposals of the President and the budget refinements proposed by our colleagues in the lower house. But we also made sure those are aligned with the results of the Senate's own consultations, the public hearings that we conducted. That is the public pulse. I begin with the environment and climate change, a lifelong advocacy, and my public record shows that. Your committee made certain that a 2018 GAB ensures ecological integrity, clean and healthy environment, risk-sensitive investments, disaster preparedness through special provisions that integrate and mainstream disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation and mitigation in government programs. We at the committee firmly believe that building an inclusive and prosperous economy requires us to continually strengthen our resilience to impacts of natural hazards and climate change. If you recall, Mr. President, we embedded the Quick Response Fund all in the budget of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Fund in 2017, only earmarking those that were meant for the agencies. In this 2018 GAB, we reverted, as practical logic dictates and per the request of all agencies, to an arrangement that we instituted in the 2016 GAA, where the QRF is lodged in individual agencies to ensure easier, quicker access and utilization when the need arises. Thus, your committee transferred 1.250 billion pesos from the NDREAM Fund to the DSWD, 1 billion pesos to the Department of Agriculture and the DPWH, 750 million pesos to the AFP, 500 million pesos each to the DOH, OCD, and NIA, 100 million pesos to the DOE's NEA. We also allocated 2 billion pesos QRF to the Department of Education, 500 million pesos of which is from the NDREAM. We support the executive branch proposal to provide 1.5 billion pesos for the Pag-asa Modernization Program, 1.5 billion for the MMDA Flood Control Program, 285 million to the Mines and Geosciences Bureau of the DNR for geohazard mapping and assessment. We agree that these resources are directly needed to strengthen our community's adaptive capacities against climate change. To further underscore this need, we require under this 2018 GAB every local government unit under the responsibility of a DILG to conduct regular and evacuation drills in coastal communities that are at risk of storm surges and landslides. These drills should simulate real emergencies, should teach our people basic survival skills, how to avoid panic, as well as help them ascertain proper responses during actual natural hazards. On the main, while the House realigned funds from other agencies to come up with 40 billion pesos for Republic Act 10931, the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, which the President signed last August 4, your committee further allocated 10 million pesos in capital outlay for each of the country's 112 state universities and colleges, simply for the reason that free college tuition alone does not make education accessible. School facilities, classrooms, laboratories, equipment, efficient and well-trained teaching personnel do. And to support enrollment in science, technology, engineering, agri-fisheries, and mathematics STEAM courses, which is now noticeable, we have realigned 327 million pesos within the budget of the DICT for free Wi-Fi for all SUCs. Global interconnectivity should extend from the homes to the schools, then on to the workplaces. For basic education, we've increased the chalk allowance for teachers from 2,500 pesos to 3,500 pesos, all amounting to 770 million pesos to sustain the increases we started in 2015. Our instruction to the Department of Budget and Management and DepEd is to please, if possible, release this allowance before the start of classes in 2018. We continue to support the efforts of the DepEd for the conservation and preservation of all remaining Gabaldon-type school buildings and other similar heritage sites, as well as its site development plans. In the 2018 budget, we've allocated the amounts of 1 billion pesos and 435 million pesos, respectively, for each of these priorities. The budget we fashioned out is a budget of continuity and sustainability. In 2017, we overwhelmingly supported PhilHealth with additional 3 billion pesos so that all Filipinos, even the 8 million nameless, faceless, vulnerable, marginalized population, can be covered by the government's point-of-care program. We are providing PhilHealth the same amount for 2018. We ask PhilHealth to please aggressively inform the needy of our country of this health subsidy. Also in 2017, we set aside 2 billion pesos in irrigation fee subsidy so that the National Irrigation Administration will no longer collect irrigation fees from our poor farmers. We earmarked the same amount for the same priority in the 2018 budget. My hope is that next year, when the NIA comes back to report to us the use of the money, it will tell us that the 34.3% poverty among our farmers, the poorest among the basic sectors, would have been significantly reduced. In this budget for next year, we reflected our continuing effort to reduce the inequality that victimizes the poor by setting aside 2 billion pesos for the repair, rehabilitation, and construction of additional DSWD centers nationwide. This amount became available after the DSWD's own internal housekeeping, which saw it realign its 1 billion pesos from its Sustainable Livelihood Program and another 1 billion pesos added by the committee. This is unprecedented, Mr. President, in terms of capital outlay for the DSWD. After the repair, rehabilitation, and construction are done, we expect the department to make available at these centers the services of a respectable shelter, access to water and electricity, working toilets, beds, proper ventilation, adequate lighting, and other essentials. We expect nothing extravagant, just what is basic and humane. We have to treat our poor with dignity, Mr. President. We continue to support the conditional cash transfer program by upholding its 89.408 billion pesos allocation, of which 31.68 billion is for rice subsidy. For 2018, an amount of 270 million pesos for the early childhood care and development nutrition package for the first 1,000 days have been set aside under the National Nutrition Council that will benefit children and adults in 16,419 barangays worst hit by malnutrition. This is a timely intervention to address the 31.4% poverty rate among the Philippines' children population, the third highest among the basic sectors. For the second year in a row, we are funding the Centenarians Act by allocating 189.5 million for a one-time cash grant of 100,000 each to 1,895 senior citizens aged 100 years and over. For the surviving spouses of the World War II veterans, your committee has allocated 1.647 billion pesos for the full, not partial, payment of total administrative disability arrears, a shameful ingratitude to those who shed sweat and blood and sacrificed lives so we may live in liberty and freedom. In addition, we set aside 30 million pesos for the construction of a hospital in Mindanao for a dwindling number of veterans. We support the proposition of the President that this budget is one that will increase the country's growth potential, patuloy na pag-unlad. This being so, we followed through our support of 1 billion pesos to the government's Pondo para sa Pagbabago under the Small Business Corp by setting aside the same amount in 2018 to boost the continuous development of MSMEs, which comprise the largest bulk of enterprises in the country. We also added 800 million pesos to the House-approved 200 million pesos for the provision of the shared services facilities. SSFs are development, support, equipment, and systems that will be made available to MSMEs to make them productive and competitive. Of the 1 billion pesos for SSF, 200 million will be for state universities and colleges that implement livelihood initiatives, 100 million pesos for schools of living tradition, 50 million pesos for MSMEs of the Marawi evacuees. We are one with the President and our colleagues in the lower house in batting for increased infrastructure spending to herald the so-called golden age of infrastructure. Aside from stimulating economic activity, estimated at a GDP growth of 7 to 8% in 2018, creating decent jobs expected at 1.6 million annually, attracting more investments, the build, build, build philosophy will ultimately expand to building human capital and inclusive social justice. Thus, we support the budgets of the agencies with hard infrastructure requirements, 30% in total of the 2018 national budget. And as one of the safeguards against waste of public funds, we are writing a new special provision that requires all government agencies with infrastructure projects to post in their official websites the status of such projects, including geotagged photos, contractors' names, project's cost and location, and project start and target date of completion. Speaking of Marawi, we support the move of the House to provide for the rehabilitation of the city, but we were firm in our stand that the budgetary allocation should be increased. Thus, in the light of Marawi City's current situation, we are making available 10 billion pesos from the NDREAM Fund for 2018 for the city's quick recovery, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. This amount is on top of the 5 billion pesos given this year from the contingent fund and fund of agencies. We are also making available a 500 million peso subsidy for a loan facility for the private sector in Marawi for the evacuees and the residents under the auspices of the Land Bank of the Philippines to enable them to reconstruct their damaged homes. In a new special provision, we specify that such loans will be free of any interest, but the loanable amount is limited to 2 million pesos per household, and the Land Bank may charge the borrower an administrative cost for processing the loan. For the Mindanao State University in the city, we've allocated 5 million for cultural mapping of the intangible and tangible heritage, all memories and materials left by the war that engulfed Marawi. We hope that this process of heritage mapping and its intended outputs can hasten the psychological healing of the affected populace and strengthen our cultural bonds with our fellow Muslim Filipinos. These budgets go with our fervent prayer that we may immediately see hope, dignity, and peace restored in the Islamic city of Marawi. With this small yet meaningful allocation, we signal to all Filipinos that the Senate accords culture and arts an important place in our budget priorities and would not allow culture agencies which provide nourishment to our national soul and identity to be left behind. Thus, your committee provided resources for the promotion and preservation of our tangible and intangible heritage. The message we are sending is that culture and arts literacy is key to national unity. The Marawi crisis brought us constructive lessons in peacemaking and peace building. It also magnified 1,000 times the difficult challenges we face towards socio-economic and political stability. And so, of course, we do not desire another Marawi crisis somewhere else in our land. Thus, for 2018, we are providing an additional 100 million pesos intelligence fund for the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, NICA, to ensure that it is ready and equipped in preventing any more Marawi-like crisis from happening. This is on top of the intelligence resources we are allocating the armed forces of the Philippines and the PNP, as well as the 36 million pesos and 35 million in confidential funds and the Situation Room funds, respectively, of the National Security Council. Despite the criticisms and the public ire hurled against the PNP, we support its funding needs because only through this can we really make them more well-equipped, efficient, and effective. Your committee does not subscribe to some wild notion that withholding resources from our police force will make them accountable. It is the PNP leadership under the President who should answer for the action, behavior, and performance of the police corps. Thus, we are allocating 1.9 billion pesos to the PNP in 2018 for it to achieve an improved police-to-population ratio of 1:511. The ideal police-to-population ratio is 1:500. About 10,000 police officer 1 recruits will benefit from this budget. We allocated 900 million pesos to the PNP to support its campaign against illegal drugs, as well as 1.2 billion pesos for the operating requirements of the PDEA. By way of support to PNP operations, we are also providing 100 million pesos for the purchase and installation of closed-circuit TV for the PNP Command Center, which we provided this year, 2017, as well as an initial 50 million pesos for the acquisition of body cameras for police officers in highly urbanized areas. We are setting aside 47.734 million pesos to finance the upkeep of the PNP Women and Children Center. For our armed services, your committee has crafted a new provision for the unprogrammed appropriation of 2 billion pesos, which shall be used exclusively to support the requirements of the AFP PNP housing project under Republic Act 7279-7835. Every soldier and police officer, through his or her work, may be on the field and outdoors. They need a shelter to go home to, as much as we citizens do. Your committee has increased from 2,000 to 4,000 pesos a month the hazard pay for the men and women of the National Bureau of Investigation, or 13.536 million pesos, knowing the risks that they take in performing their duties and responsibilities. For the Philippine Coast Guard, we provided an additional 120 million pesos for the installation of buoys in Coast Guard stations nationwide to ensure safety at sea, especially in the eastern seaboard facing Philippine rights. While seemingly minuscule in amount, this action is part of our efforts to secure Philippine rice and signals to the world, particularly to our neighbors in Asia, that we have the political will to assert the integrity and our sovereignty over Philippine territory. Likewise, your committee has allocated 8.2 million for the hazard pay of Department of Foreign Affairs employees in hardship posts, which are increasing in number given the very volatile socio-economic and political situation in many parts of the globe that has engendered problems like terrorism and transnational crimes and disease. Our diplomatic personnel should be well protected as they respond to the challenges of their official representation of the Philippines as an active member of the international community. To ensure a more efficient judicial system, we are providing additional 426 million for the Sandigan Bayan for next year. The amount is inclusive of a 10 million peso rewards fund for whistleblowers. In this budget, the Supreme Court gets an increase of 100 million, the Court of Tax Appeals and Court of Appeals 2 million each. The following constitutional offices also get their fair share in the form of increases in the 2018 budgets. Civil Service Commission, 71.8750 million. Commission on Audit, 40 million. Commission on Human Rights, 156.432 million on top of its restored budget. Office of the Ombudsman, 143.653 million pesos, specifically for the implementation of the electronic filing of the Statement of Assets, or SAL-N, of government officials and employees, worth 16.653 million pesos, and for its building, 127 million. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I could not have completed the serious but fulfilling and productive task of fine-tuning the 2018 General Appropriations Bill without the esteemed company of our very hard-working vice chairpersons, Senators Sani Angara, Bam Aquino, J.V. Ejercito, Ping Lacson, and Cynthia Villar, to whom this representation is sincerely thankful and grateful, not only for their meticulous employ of their own fine-tooth combs in asking the relevant questions on the budget, but also for their diligence and wit. I should not miss to mention all of our distinguished colleagues who have participated in our public hearings, both in the majority and the minority. All of you here in the chamber have surely enriched our discussions, and you deserve our people's commendation. I could not do it without you. The Filipino people are awaiting with nervous anticipation and hope the translation of the outcomes of the Duterte administration's budgetary proposal into meaningful, tangible, and real life-affecting reforms, as well as real and solid benefits yung nararamdaman ng pinakamahihirap na Pilipino. As chairperson of your Committee on Finance, I myself am getting very impatient for results and watching closely how things will change for the better for our people. This must actually be fast and sooner, I often tell myself. Yet, as elected senators, duty dictates that we, as members of a collegial institution, must show the way in so-called drinking tea from an empty cup, the highest degree of patience, as Confucius himself taught. This is what we do in a democracy. We adhere to certain rules, processes, and systems in our work to prevent disorder, if not chaos. And this adherence to rules, processes, and systems applies to our work in the national budget. We must propose or concur with amendments as the Constitution instructs us. That is why today, on behalf of your Committee on Finance, I propose for the Senate's approval of and concurrence with the 2018 General Appropriations Bill, as thus presented under Senate Committee on Finance Report 167, programmed new appropriations, 2,786,187,550,000 pesos. Unprogrammed appropriations, 75,340,000,000 pesos. Total new appropriations, 2,861,527,550,000 pesos. Mr. President, I now make myself available to answer any question from the distinguished members of this chamber. Once again, salamat po.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
thank you. We wish to commend and thank the distinguished lady from of the Committee on Finance for the hard work that they have done together with her Vice Chair. Now, we have the schedule rundown of the agencies to be considered today as follows. In this morning session, we will be tackling the general principles and hopefully be able to finish it before lunchtime. But if not, then we will continue later on. And in the afternoon sessions, the schedules are the Department of Finance and the attached agencies, the budgetary support to government corporations, the Department of Budget and Management, the allocation to local government units, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Fund, the Contingent Fund, Miscellaneous Personal Benefits Fund, Pension and Gratuity Fund, and unprogrammed appropriations. So to start off, may I move to open the period of interpellations for House Bill 6215 under Committee Report 167.
Any objection? Hearing none, we are now into the period of for interpellations.
Mr. President, for the general principles, we now recognize the sponsor, Senator Loren Legarda. And first on the schedule to interpellate is Senator Pampilo Lacson, Mr. President.
The sponsor,
May we have a few minutes
Before-
suspension,
yes,
Mr.
before
President,
I
so that
recognize them,
the staff
session.
may be called in.
session is suspended.
Discuss na lang po ako. Kaya ako Tito Sen. 1 minute. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Let me recognize our sponsor and Senator Lacson for interpellation on the general principles.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished lady from Antique and the Republic of the Philippines yield to some questions? This won't take long. I won't make it hard for you and also to myself, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Mr. President.
willingly, Mr. President, whose amendments or subcommittee report as my vice chair were all integrated in the committee report. Just to put it on record, including the full payment to the veterans and all the amendments. But yes, I am more than willing to listen.
Thank you, Mr. President. With your indulgence, I have some slides for a better understanding and clearer presentation. I will start off with my favorite topic, underspending. I won't get tired of hammering on this issue precisely because I consider underspending as one of the worst enemies of progress. Dinipain po ng DBM yung underspending. Ito napakaliwanag kasi tinagalog na po nila sa kanilang FAQ, no? Ang underspending ay tumutukoy sa paggastos ng isang ahensya ng gobyerno ng mas kakaunting budget kaysa sa kabuuang nakalaang budget para sa kanya na nakasaad sa General Appropriations Act o GAA, ang ating national budget. Tama rin po sinabi, kung sa personal na pananalapi, tama po yung mag-underspend kasi may tatabi ka para sa ibang pangailangan. Pero sa pagpapatapo ng gobyerno, masama po yung underspending dahil yung mga proyekto ay nasa sakripisyo. So, ano ba yung picture ng underspending na ating bansa? Over the years, 2010 hanggang 2016, ito po yung makita natin ng larawan ng underspending at unused appropriations na nag-average po ito ng, sinumulan po namin 2007 hanggang 2016, 324 billion a year, no? At noong 2016, noong nakarang taon, napakalaki po ng underspending, 596 billion pesos. So ano po bang impact nito? Ang impact nito is may tama po ang GDP kasi pagka dinivide natin yung unused appropriations by the nominal GDP, kung titingnan natin po sa 2016, ang nominal GDP ay nasa 14,480,720,000,000. Kapag ito'y consider natin o equate natin yung unused, ang nawawala po sa GDP growth, sa growth ng ating bansa, sa 2016, 4%. Ang ibig sabihin po nito, kung nagkataong walang underspending sa taong 2016, I don't know kung tama po yung aking pagkakaalam dito, pagkakaintindi. Dapat pumalo tayo ng 6.9. Dapat mahigit 10% ang ating GDP growth rate. Tama po ba yung aking observation, aking pagkaintindi?
Tama po kayo. Pareho po yatang ating binabasa sa 2016 nga, ayon sa aking tala, ay 596.6 billion nga yung total unused. At I think yun ang tinutukoy nyo, na syempre ito po yung nakakaapekto at nakasaad po to sa aking speech earlier. These are less classrooms built, less roads built, and less services to our people rendered.
Well, my question is, what does the government, the present government, intend to do to correct this?
To spur the spending of
spending.
agencies. Yes.
Yung specific po, hindi yung rhetoric
Yes. Hindi naman po ako rhetoric
Hindi po
sumagot.
kayo, hindi po kayo.
Oo, sige. Mr. President, kaya nga po nakasaad at priority po yung ating Budget Reform Act na hinahiring ko na po. Una, ginawa pong 12-month cycle para po ang pag-iisip ng ahensya o departamento ay pwede pa naman next year kasi continuing appropriations. Bagamat ang 2016 ay continuing appropriations po sa taong ito at yung 596 ay yung total unused ng December of 2016, but the budget for 2017 really will expire in December. And I know that the Department of Budget and Management, Secretary Jokno, frequently reminds all the departments through the cabinet members and their staff to spend, and they have very frequent monitoring of this. Second, in my speech, I mentioned that we have a important special provision, especially for the infrastructure agencies, to upload in their website all details, target completion, contractors, location, to geotag everything. Because when people are watching, people who are implementing projects are perhaps not just more wary and careful, but also perhaps more efficient. Third, Mr. President, we intend to hold oversight committee hearings starting January, because we hope that the budget will be signed by the President by mid-December, to spur agencies and to really see their budget spending starting January and February. With these and more, Mr. President, we hope that there would be more efficient utilization of what Congress allocated.
I have with me a copy of the GAB, yung House Bill 6215, page number 623, sa lines 45 and 46.
May karagdagan pa po akong sagot sa inyo.
Okay, sorry
Yes,
po.
opo. Ito po ay na-anticipate na ng DBM. May I just put on record and just to further elucidate on what I said. Itong una, yung budget reform bill, sinabi na po natin. Ito pong panukalang batas na ito from obligation budget to cash budget. Kasi po ang nangyari, for example, 2016 budget, hinihir ko 2017 budget of DOTR, for example. I was hearing it last year. And we saw that the previous DOTR did not spend for the regional airports and their seaports, etc. And so what the present DOTR did last year for the 2016 that would have expired was to transfer it to CAAP and to PPA just to obligate it. So, nagiging ugali po ng ahensya, hindi ko dinalahat po, wag naman po magalit sa akin, ay minsan, para lang ma-obligate po, ay linilipat para gumalaw. But we are not certain if all of these have actually been built. And so, under the proposed budget reform bill, we propose a shift from an obligation budget to a cash budget, and from a 2-year appropriation, which I mentioned, to a 1-year appropriation. And clearly, this will really impose greater discipline on the agencies to manage their budgetary funds so that within the year, they can deliver the goods and services and not only enter into contracts. Because I am one with you, Mr. President. Ayaw po natin masasabi, ang laki ng budget, linaan namin ng pondo. Nasaan? Ayan, na-obligate na. No-obligate. Hindi naman naitayo. Ang gusto natin, cash budget, na disburse ang pondo, tumataas yung building, yung gusali, nagagawa yung highway, nandyan yung tulay, nandyan yung pagkain sa mahihirap. Yun po ang ating gusto. At yun po sana ang mangyayari pag mapasa natin yung budget reform. But even before the budget reform bill is enacted, we already are doing this 12-month cycle now. Second, sir, the Budget and Treasury Management System will integrate appropriations, allotments, cash allocations, commitments, disbursements, and reporting functions in a single system, and monitor the status of appropriations, allotments, obligations, disbursements online and real time. Yan. And they will do away with the manual processes and shift to automated financial transactions. Mr. President, this will ensure the proper reporting and auditing of and aid the government in making evidence-based decisions. Third po, the implementation of the medium-term expenditure framework. This will be institutionalized by developing a manual that will assist the line agencies in rolling out a medium-term budget consistent with the development plan. This will also strengthen the link of planning and budgeting of line agencies by quantifying the cost of implementing the strategic plans consistent with the PDP. And then to address also the problem you always hear during our hearings, Mr. President, is procurement. To address the procurement bottlenecks, the IRR of the government procurement reform law has been revised and simplified. And, hopefully this will hurdle the bottlenecks. And those are some of the measures that the current administration under Secretary Jokno is doing in DBM and the economic managers as well.
What are actually the culprits, the primary culprits in the underspending, Mr. President?
What are the culprits? Well, first, offhand, Mr. President, I think poor planning. Because when you ask for too much, more than you can bite or chew, then you're not able to spend it. But really, Mr. President, we admit that there could be procurement difficulties and implementation bottlenecks. It's a new law. I think that law is, 5 years old, stemming from the deeper and bigger issue of weak planning, as I mentioned. Pag mali po ang paghanda ng proyekto, poorly prepared projects, delays in complying with the preconditions for the release of funds, feasibility studies or design processes are still ongoing, duplication of components for some projects, delays in finalizing the technical specifications. Technical specifications are not available locally. And apart from poor planning, implementation difficulties, the difficulty in obtaining clearances or permits from oversight or regulatory agencies, LGUs or development partners, right-of-way problems, and other legal issues. These enumerated issues, Mr. President, affect the procurement process, and I always hear our agencies say, kasi procurement law. But there are agencies that have faster implementation. So Secretary Jokno says, it's not the law, it's the people, or it's the agency. And I would like to give the procurement law a chance to see if one agency can perform well, why can't the others? And so it really boils down to poorly prepared projects and implementation difficulties, which I admit is institutional in nature and really mainstreamed, or wrong word, in the bureaucratic red tape. We really have to do something about napakamasalimuot na proseso ng bürokrasya. Mismon tayo po nababagalan. Paano po ang private and foreign businessmen and investors in industry? So it's so difficult to traverse the bureaucratic red tape.
I agree, Mr. President, because it is only through proper and correct identification of the problems and issues that we can solve or identify the solution.
Opo.
No, and I agree with you when you inserted an amendment do sa House Bill. Kaya lang, may comment lang ako dito because between lines 45 and 46 do sa page 623, you propose geotagging, web-based monitoring. And I agree, I think that will somehow help in expediting infrastructure projects, the implementation. However, ang sinabi niyo rito, further it is encouraged.
Imposed.
At the proper time, during the
Imposed.
period of amendments, mas maganda mandated.
Mandated,
Gawin
yes.
nating mandatory instead na in-encourage lang natin yung mga agencies to use geotagging. Kasi people or the public will actually see how they are doing,
Yes.
pati mga contractors and
We
everybody
accept your
involved.
proposed amendment at the proper time, Mr. President.
Yes, this is not intended to put on the spot the agencies, no, na ito yung mga tops sa highest or merong highest unused appropriations. I'm sorry, andito yung nanay, pero number 1 yung Department of Public Works and Highways.
Yes,
And
Mr.
may mga
President.
reason naman siguro, Madam.
Tatayo
Madam
yata
Chair.
yung nanay.
Followed by DepEd. Ito po, so ang tanong ko rito is, what does DBM and the leadership, no, intend to do with these departments? How would they be prodded to correct this crime? Ang tingin ko dito, Mr. Chairman, kasi we're passing a law, General Appropriations Act, and they're not complying with the law. So, medyo criminal ang dating nito.
What will you do daw with the understanding?
And ito yung actual unused saka unobligated nila.
Mr. President, ito po hindi manggagaling sa akin. Ito po, kinokot ko po si Secretary Jokno. Simple lang pong sagot. You will lose your job.
Okay. Medyo drastic naman siguro.
Ayun po ang sagot sa akin eh. Sinasabi ko lang po.
The next slide will show the MPBF. Papakita ko lang dito yung nare-revert sa Treasury. May mga figures po dyan. And
Yeah. 2 years.
just to fast track, we'll go direct to reverted appropriations, no? Madam Chairperson. Ito yung mga nare-revert sa Treasury on account of underspending. Yan, malalaki po yung mga amounts. And I'd like to ask or to pose this question. Yung sa current, sa ngayon, do we have a data on how much the Treasury has at the moment?
How much?
How much does our Treasury have in cash and receipts?
How much?
Executive session?
Yes, executive session on, because it's never divulged in public, on how
Why?
much.
What's the reason? The public, I think the public is entitled to know how much money do we have or how much money we have. Hindi naman ma-hold up yung treasury.
1 minute suspension. They're explaining to me why it cannot be divulged here, but in executive session, they're able to do it. 1 minute.
Session suspended.
Bakit?
O, mag-usap
Chairman.
kayo. Naka-suspend. Sandali.
You know the,
Mamaya pa ang budget kasi.
I'm just answering yung understanding.
Suspended.
Can you bring back the underspending of the DPWH?
Teka, sandali.
No, she does.
This budget was passed by the previous administration.
Naka-suspend tayo diya. Sandali. Mamaya. 1 minute.
Hindi, she doesn't find this in the suspended. Nasagot. Nagamit lang niya yun. She doesn't find that suspended. Alam naman niya sinabihan. Hindi, gusto niya sabihin, gamitin na yung mic para marinig yung sagot.
Mr. President, ready to resume.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, every Monday and Tuesday, the Philippine government issues treasury bills and bonds. And then, if the public is able to know how much cash we have, then they can, the lenders, then the market will be affected, Mr. President.
Okay, so napakisabit na lang sa mga
Yes,
colleagues natin,
yes.
including
In
this
executive
representation.
session, yes.
Okay.
Oh, you can submit.
Chairman,
Yes, I think the
can I
majority,
interject with the comments of
is it the chair that will recognize Senator Villar or the
Mr.
chair?
President?
Yeah,
Yes.
but with the permission of Senator Legada, who has actually the floor. So, will you allow?
Yes, Mr. President, although we're not discussing yet the public works
No, I
budget.
just want to
Yes.
Yes,
answer.
Senator Villar is recognized.
Anyway, this budget, the past budget we're talking about is the budget passed by the previous administration, and the DPWH took over almost half a year, di ba? After, that's almost middle of last year. And besides, I think there is something wrong with how they make the DPWH budget. I think the proponents of the projects, when they ask for a budget, they ask for both the right-of-way budget and the construction budget. I suggested that if we ask for a budget, during the first year, we ask for the right-of-way budget because it takes a year to rather to take care of the right-of-way. So if you included in your budget the construction, then definitely the construction cannot be done in 1 year. That's why I'm always saying to the DPWH that you have to ask the proponents to put first a budget for the right-of-way, take care of the right-of-way, and the next year, you ask for the construction budget so the underspending will go down. Yun ang ano. But you know, this proponent, they're so excited about the budget. They want all the budget, and the result is they're not able to implement the budget. That's why there is a lot of underspending at the DPWH. Yun
In other
lang.
words, it's poor planning.
Yes. But you cannot
And-
stop the proponents like the mayors, the governors, the congressmen who are all asking for budget in
That is a
their
problem.
locality.
And
Yeah.
we observed, whenever congressmen make
Not
their
only
insertions,
congressmen, mayors, barangay captains, governors,
because
vice mayors.
when congressmen make their insertions, we notice na sinasabay na nila
Yes.
yung road right of way doon sa construction ng road.
Oo, but it
Alam
takes,
yes.
it takes at least a year to take care of the right-of-way. Kaya dapat mauuna yung
Yung
right-of-way
right of way.
budget.
I could not agree more, Mr.
Yes, so
President.
that's the problem.
Maraming salamat
so we
po.
should be able to control ourselves.
Balik na
not
po
to do
tayo.
this.
Balik na po tayo sa general principle.
Okay.
But that's a very good insight shared with us by Senator Villar. Senator Legarda, you have the floor, ma'am.
Mr. President, moving on, whatever happened to the issue of the UWACs, yung Unified Accounts Code Structures? In 2014, visible po ito sa budget books. But we noticed after 2014, nawala na ito sa budget books. So we cannot, mahirap mag-track ng mga projects, mga PAPs, kapag walang UWACs. Malaking tulong sana eh.
It's incorporated, Mr. President, in the budget. I understand.
Yeah, incorporated, but I think it's only in the DBM website. But in the budget books, we can no longer see the UWACs.
It's being used, Mr. President. It may not be seen, but you cannot encode without being part of the system.
We know that, Mr.
Yeah.
President, but it's easier to track PAPs when UWACs are there. We noticed after 2014, when we raised the issue of UWACs and we were supporting it completely, biglang nawala sa 2015. Baka pwede balik natin. UWACs is a big help for a unified accounting, auditing, and reporting of all financial transactions of the government. So if we are for transparency, why remove the UWACs in the budget books? Ang alam ko rito, tinanggal doon sa babae.
Nasagaan ng 2017. Mr. President, they're looking for the special provision where we provided for the use of the UWACs. Yan. Section 2. Nasagaan, 2017. Ito. Ito. Yes, ma'am. It's actually in section 2 of our 2017.
Yes, but na-mention lang, but where are the UWACs? Where are the codes?
Ito po, section 2, budget with UWACs, To properly implement this act, DBM shall identify the account codes of the items of appropriations pursuant to the Unified Accounts Code structure. It's there. The UAC shall cover the funding source, organization, location, program. Nandyan po. It is contained,
It's just mentioned
it is mentioned
in a provision.
in the general provisions of
Yes.
the 2017 GAA. It will also be mentioned in our 2018 GAA, correct? Yes, it's there.
You know,
Yes.
for better tracking, dapat sa NEP pa lang, we should start from the NEP so we can track kung ano yung nagbabago as the budget proposal.
According to DBM, Mr. President, in the website, the codes are there. When you're in the DBM website,
Yeah.
the UAC
We're talking of the
codes
GAA.
are there. In the GAA.
Hindi ba pwedeng from the NEP to the GAB to the Senate version all the way to the GAA, merong UWAC so we can easily track. Nahirapan kami mag-track ng mga
There are amendments, so it will be very tedious because there are changes.
well, in this day and age of computer.
There are 54 codes.
Technology,
And then from
wala
the
nang
NEP to the
tedious
GAB
dyan.
to the GAA. But once it's GAA, it's there, correct? Yes. They can have a tracer from the
Yes.
NEP to the GAB.
Yes, sana.
Okay. For
Okay.
next year?
Another issue, moving on, Mr. President, Madam Chair, yung procurement of common use supplies. No? There was an issue before in the Senate na ang dami raw procurement ng toilet paper. We found out, ang isang reason, itong common use supplies, there's a procurement service, matagal bago dumating. Ito, na-experience sa mga staff natin, ito 6 months. Pag magre-request tayo ng mga laptops, magre-request tayo ng office supplies, 6 months, and sometimes we resort to using our own MOEs to purchase. Baka naman pwedeng ma-decentralize na ito, kaya maglagay ng mga warehouses in different locations. Eh ito, Senate na nga ito. You can just imagine yung agencies in the Visayas and Mindanao. It is in Section 20, under Section 20.
Mr. President, they're going to do that, yes, to have home depots. Depots, common depots, what do you call that? What do you call them? Regional depots are already established. They are already established.
But how come we still experience so much delay in our procurement?
Saan ba ang procurement head?
I understand, Madam Chair, pati yung LGUs kasama rito, hindi ba? Procurement ng LGUs, kasama dyan sa electoral catalog. It's not only national agencies, even the LGUs.
So, the solution...
Kaya lang po minsan yung agencies, they overstock, they try to purchase for 6 months. Like the Supreme Court, they will do 1 year. So it will be really available ma'am yung stock dun sa mga depots natin. We will have to send it to the people for the regionalized. Pero
So the regional depots are already there?
yes, in the LGUs platform.
I believe, Mr. President, there are already regional depots and the local governments buy from the regional depots, including national government agencies.
But how come the delays at least 6 months?
May delay?
That's our experience. I just talked to my staff last night.
No toilet paper?
Lahat ng mga, karamihan ng mga office supplies, Mr. President. And nandito yung mga staff natin, I think they shared some experience.
I buy my own.
Yun nga that's the problem. We resort to buying, using our MOE to buy our supplies. When in fact, we can procure it from the procurement service.
Sure. Bakit nga ganon?
But matagal.
O bakit mabagal? O sige. So, Mr. President, I would like to request the DBM head of procurement and the head of procurement of the Senate to talk to each other. I cannot invent
I'm
the
not just
answer.
talking, I'm not just
No,
concerned
and
about
to
the
see what's
Senate.
the problem, why, despite the fact that there are regional depots where I am told that the local governments and national agencies, again in concept, already procure or get their supplies from there, but you're correct in saying that there are delays. So I would not be able to answer that, depending on what the Senate procurement is doing and perhaps other agencies' procurement are doing. Would like to see where lies the problem.
When I was par, yun din ang problema namin sa
Bakit nga ganun?
Yolanda.
Sino may problema? Senate procurement. Ano? Ha? Ano?
Yeah, 1 month delay is tolerable, pero 6 months,
Okay.
Senator Lax,
It's being, Mr. President, according to the DBM, that they realize a problem, they're changing everything, and even the purchase of vehicles is going to be centralized.
decentralized,
centralized.
centralized. Based on it.
Centralized based on the suggested retail price. In terms of vehicles, Mr. President.
Vehicles, no problem. But office supplies, yung common, tawag na common use supplies.
Bakit nga mabagal?
While we are on the topic, can I interject, Senator Lacson? Senator Lacson is complaining about the delay. But how about the quality of the goods that we're getting? We have experience with defective ball pens, defective staplers also. So let me bring this up while we are on the topic.
We have no sign pens, and we can vouch.
Ano ba yun?
How come I buy my own things? Hindi ko lang provided pala. Mr. President, this issue will be addressed by the head of procurement of the Senate. And I cannot answer you why there's a 6-month delay in the Senate, Mr. President, because they assure me that there are regional depots, the LGUs and national agencies get from them, and they say that they are not aware that there's a 6-month delay in the Senate.
I
think
overheard Senator Gatchalian, sometimes 1 year daw, sabi niya.
computer 1 year. Maybe it's a Senate problem. Who is our head of procurement? I'll find out. But I understand your impatience. I don't like to invent an answer, Mr. President. But maybe during the break, then I can answer you this afternoon about
Yes.
the Senate procurement issue. Tawagin na lang nyo yung head ng procurement ng Senado at saka DBM, mag-usap where lies the problem. Because I understand what you're saying.
The
why you
problem
want
is not in the Senate. The problem is in the procurement service, Mr. President. And the Senate President raised another issue, the quality of the procured materials.
I cannot say that. Who determines the cost? Mr. President, it is the user or the national agencies that determines the specifications, and so the procurement service would purchase whatever are the specifications, and maybe the price, there's a price ceiling, and that is the kind of quality that we get. That's why I buy my own, Mr. President. But seriously, Mr. President, we will ask the head of the Senate procurement and the, because I'm sure it's not just the Senate
Not just
that's
the Senate.
experiencing this, it's the whole
Bureaucracy.
Not just the slowness, but also the quality.
Anyway, let's move on, Mr. President. Yung impoundment, Section 60, I have a comment on this provision. No problem with the premise, yung if the appropriations are no longer required to fulfill the objectives originally sought to be achieved by the PAPs, covering the same or in case of an unmanageable national government deficits. Okay lang yon, that's fine. Yung sa last paragraph, yung congressional inaction after the 45-day period is equivalent to an approval of the impoundment proposal. So pag hindi tayo kumibo, rescinded na. So it's as if we're passing on to the executive the power of appropriations. Remember, we have been deliberating on the budget. I have a proposal and I hope we can, at the proper time during the period of amendments, baka pwedeng baliktarin natin. Congressional inaction within the 45-day period is equivalent to disapproval of the impoundment proposal. Instead of silence means yes, let's make it silence means no. And I assume our colleagues will agree with me on this because it's tantamount to surrendering the power of appropriations to the executive branch.
Yes, Mr. President.
Next item, yung central versus regional. This is fine because 1:3 yung ratio. And it only shows that we really intend to download resources to the countrysides or to the regions. 66.4 against 33.6 non-regionalized budget. Because after all, andyan naman sa local government code na active dapat yung mga local development councils. That's where the national budget should emanate, not from the top to bottom. Dapat bottom up because they know kung ano ba yung needs and priorities in the respective areas. And this is not what is being practiced, Mr. President. We just simply ram down the throat of the end users by way of the national budget kung ano yung kailangan nila. That's why there's so much disconnect between the needs and priorities of local governments or the countrysides doon sa ini-impose natin sa kanila. So why can't we simply follow the local government code and make active all the local development councils, all the way up from the barangay, municipalities and cities, provincial, and then regional, all the way up to the NEP. Ang nangyayari, by October, pagtapos na yung deliberation ng mga local development councils and the governors who are also members of the regional development council, when they deal with the DBM, for example, they will be told na wala na, tapos na yung budget call. So how do we correct the disconnect between the local and the national?
Mr. President, the regional development councils composed of the NEDA and the local government units.
And the governors.
And the governors, all the LGUs are consulted and they submit, they're part of the budget call, I am told, and their requests and their priorities are given to the economic team that prepares the budget.
I've talked to some governors. Ang sinasabi nila, pagdating ng October, sinasabihan sila na tapos na yung budget. Halos na ipasa na, nasa Congress na. As a matter of fact, ngayong October, ngayon pala nagmi-meet yung mga local development councils. And I think we should correct the disconnect, pati yung timing. Dapat yung dinideliberate nila sa local development councils, gagamitin dapat yun for next year's budget. Or 2019, for that matter. Para sa ganun, ma-incorporate yung
Yes.
needs and priorities of the local.
Because they know it best, yes.
Of course, they know their needs, they know their priorities. National government would not know that better than the local government units. Anyway, it's all in the Local Government Code of 1991.
Yes.
What's the purpose of creating local development councils if we are not utilizing them properly and timely?
Mr. President, since our national agencies also have their regional offices and provincial offices, and they submit the requirements, and these regional directors consult with the local governments, and I am told that all the output of the local development councils are submitted to the national agencies. Their outputs are incorporated in the budget call, I am told.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ito yung mga issues. issue number 1, duplication. No? DPWH and DepEd. Meron tayong items or allocation sa DPWH na DepEd infra, like school building. Why would we lodge in the DPWH budget school buildings that should be under the jurisdiction of the DepEd? It's okay if they will be the one to implement, but they should be lodged or parked in the budget of the DepEd because they know more. At least yung planning, kung saan lalagay eskwelahan, alam ng DepEd yun eh. DPWS, they wouldn't know. I have no problem with DPWH implementing the projects. But it should be DepEd that should determine where and how much they should program.
Yes, Mr. President. First, the site development plan is lodged under the DepEd. Second,
Yes.
Mr. President, the basic education facilities where the school buildings are is lodged under the DepEd. And they're the ones who determine where the location will be. And once they have all the requirements, then they go to the DPWH for the implementation, since DPWH is the infrastructure arm of government.
But why would the appropriations or the location be given to the DPWH? It should be with the DepEd and let DPWH implement. Tapos duplicitous eh.
Mr. President,
It's confusing, Mr. President, because there's already a budget under the DepEd budget. There's already an appropriations under the DepEd budget for school building program. There's another appropriation under DPWH for school building program. Meron andyan, no? Andyan sa visual.
Page 26 ng GAP. DP. Page 26. Wala sa iyo natin.
Ayan, 1226. Andyan eh. You can find it on page 1226 of the GAB. In fact, nag-increase pa nga eh. From the NEP, ang nasa NEP, 64,831,937,000 sa local program, buildings,
Last year yan yung nangyari yan.
and other structures.
I move it to the DepEd. It should belong to
Yes.
DepEd.
Mr.
Look,
President,
there's the chart.
yes, you're correct. You're
Pakitin nyo nga yung ilaw para makita ng mga...
You're correct, Mr. President. I understand now your question.
Ito, Mr. President, ha?
Maliwanag na po, ililipat po natin sa DepEd. Dahil ang DepEd, nasa kanila nakalodge, yun. Ito po, sa NEP, wala. Tama? Wala sa NEP. Pagdating sa GAB, nagkaroon.
Yun ang problema.
Ibabalik natin sa NEP.
Mr. President, pagdaan ng BICAM yan, lalaki pa yan. Ito yung sa 2017.
Mr. President, with the permission of
With the permission of our colleagues, Senator Recto wants
if I may add to the discussion on this issue with the permission of our two colleagues, Mr. President. My understanding is this. What is lodged in the DPWH are line item appropriations for school buildings, ready to go. What is in the DepEd are lump sum budgets that they have no idea where to put them yet. And I can explain that later on when I ask my own questions. That is my understanding, Mr. President, just to add that to the record. Thank you.
Why would DepEd not have an idea where to put up the school buildings? Anong basis nila for asking that for that budget, for that amount?
Contingency fund.
Mr. President, if the question is to this representative, is because the DepEd only does tabletop surveys. They do not know, they do not have a site development plan for all the schools nationwide, Mr. President. Now, and that is why last year we put a budget for site development plan. In fact, napakaliit, if I'm not mistaken, anywhere from 150 to 500 million lang eh. for 2017 ang site development plan. So, when I say tabletop, talagang walang plano. They don't know the lot size. And when we construct buildings, kung saan available yung lot, lagay lang na lagay. Ngayon, ubus na. Some of this property, ubus na, wala ka ng paglalagyan. You'll have to tear down the building to do vertical. 2 stories, 3 stories, 4 stories. So, ang ginagawa lang ng DepEd, ito yung numero ng estudyante, this million in this area, divided by 40, ito lang ang classroom, dagdagan natin ang classroom. But they don't know in the actual area kung ilan bang kakasya dyan na classroom, halimbawa, Mr. President.
Then we really have a problem. We cannot solve the
We
problem
do
of
have a big
underspending.
problem, not only with DepEd, but also with public hospitals. The same applies for public hospitals, Mr. President.
Then we cannot really solve the problem of underspending because if they don't know where to put the money, how can they spend it?
Mr. President, during our committee hearing of DepEd and DPWH, I even embedded the DPWH person in charge of the school building program so that they can coordinate closely with DepEd so that all the requirements of DepEd that DPWH will implement can be made faster. Yes, that is one of the reasons for the underspending because DPWH claims DepEd does not give them the sites, that they don't have the requirements to build, while DPWH said, DepEd says that they're giving it to DPWH. So there should be closer coordination between DepEd and DPWH.
I hope you don't mind,
Mr.
Mr.
President, can I interject?
Senator Villar, go ahead.
No, I think the DepEd is basing their budget from the number of students. So they will just ask for a budget that will fit to the number of students. Then, after passing the budget, then that's the time they look for the place where they will build the schools. That's why there's no definite place where to build it.
Then the question is, what's the basis for the amount that they're asking?
Ayan, yan, yan.
And they do this year
With the
after year
permission
after
of
year.
Senator Villar, can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Mr. President, I recall it was only this year because last year the DepEd asked this representation for the site development plan. I think it was Senator Recto and that USEC, there's a new USEC, I forget the name. And it was Senator Recto whose amendment we accepted and a certain USEC or an ASEC of DepEd because there was no planning, right? So thank you, Ralph, for that. So, Mr. President, admittedly, in the past, there was no planning. There's a budget and they don't know where to put it. Kaya po, mabagal ang implementasyon. And that is the reason why it's one of the most slow-moving agencies in implementing it. And my understanding of the DepEd school building program in DPWH is these are particular sites already made available where in the districts, because the congressmen know their areas, along with local governments, there are available sites for the school building under DPWH. That's what I can surmise.
I hope you don't mind, Mr. President, Madam Chair. While we're touching on the budgets of agencies, no, these are policy issues that must be resolved by the executive branch,
Yes.
by the economic managers, because apektado lahat eh.
I will ask, wait, 1 minute. So ano na? You're correct, Mr. President. We therefore will go back to the NEP and to lodge all the school building construction under a school building fund under DepEd to be implemented closely with DPWH.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Another issue, yung walang kamatayang Agno River.
Saan po yun?
Agno River, ito yung sa norte, mga Ilocano. Alam nyo, Mr. President, hindi na matapos-tapos ang appropriation ng Agno River. Repair and rehabilitation of Agno River. For the past 8 years, from 2011 hanggang 2017, 5.4 billion
Under
pesos.
DP or NIA? NIA. Ay, naku, NIA.
Kaya nga, anong we keep on appropriating, hindi na matapos yung Agno River. Napakalinis na dapat yan. Tsaka baka napakalalim na yan. I think we're wasting a lot of, money. Yeah. For 2018, that's 1.17 billion. Again. Yeah. Mm. Oh. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sige, sige. Sa amendment na.
I know the budget of
Tapos
Mr. President, I agree with you, and at the proper time, I would be happy to receive your proposals, Mr. President. I will micromanage the, is it NIA? Is it NIA or the NIA project?
NIA or DA. Meron nga nakalodge sa budget ng DA, may nakalodge pa sa budget ng NIA.
Yes, Senator Villar again will answer.
Meron pa rin sa DPWH yan.
The irrigation facilities under DA are the small irrigation facilities, the solar small irrigation
We're talking of
facilities.
Agno River, madam.
No, the Agno River, I think it's with NIA. The problem with NIA, it has been their practice that the repair expense is almost equal to the new irrigation facilities. This year, I have asked them to revise. I told them that dati parang they're equal, 50-50. 50% repair, 50% new irrigation facilities. Now I have asked them to do 35% repair, 65% irrigation facilities. Ayoko lang silang biglain, but next year, I will ask them to do 20% repair and 80% new irrigation facilities to solve the problem of NIA.
These are recurring appropriations, year in and year
We will
out.
closely look into that, Mr. President.
Thank
And
you.
I appreciate your bringing this to our attention. I could not do it alone, as I told you. I would need your eagle eyes to be able to look at Agno and other river systems. While we are in favor of disaster risk reduction and climate change mitigation measures through flood control, we also have to see whether these are actually implemented properly that have really serviced the communities. So I will be happy to receive your amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next, ito, redundant po ito, student financial assistance. Meron na tayong universal access to quality tertiary education, 40 billion. Next item, Mr. President, yung redundancy sa student financial assistance.
Yes.
Meron na nakaprogram na 40 billion pesos for the universal access to quality tertiary education. Ngayon, meron pa ring tulong-dunong program under CHED, sa NEP, 5.8 billion, sa GAB, meron pa ring 3.8. Para saan po ito?
Mr. President, yes, the 40 billion is free college education for state universities and colleges. Tulong-dunong would include even those in private institutions for the indigent.
Yung DSWD. Meron pang DSWD, 5.386. Ba't nagpapaaral na rin ba ang DSWD, Mr. President?
Yusek Leiko. Ano yun? Mr. President, for DSWD, I am told that these are school-related expenses. Obviously, Mr. President, it's not just the tuition, not just the dormitory, but many expenses of schools, and these are for the indigent families under DSWD, Mr. President.
Mr. President, sabihin ko sa inyo, totoo, mga congressmen po yung nag-identify nito.
Mr. Leco, Congressman ba o kayo?
Tulong-dunong, pati yung sa DSWD, ito yung earmarks ng mga congressmen.
Mr. President,
And walang qualifier ito. Hindi alam kung sino papadala, kung sino sulatan, doon yun ang binibigyan. 1,000 pesos, 2,000 pesos, 3,000 pesos.
buti na lang po nandito yung OIC ng DSWD who's an expert in public finance, professor from AIM.
We can ask him.
Sana po ang nagsabi sa akin, nasa NEP po nila yan at sila po ang nag-evaluate ng mga mahihirap na pamilya na nasa kolehiyo ang mga estudyante for expenses outside of the tuition. Kailangan po talaga ng DSWD yan.
Well, iba yung pagkaalam ko. Anyway, Mr. President, I just
Tinanong
brought
ko
it
po sa
out.
kanila kung sa congressman o sa kanila. Kayo po. Face-to-face po ang interaction sa mga mahihirap na pamilya.
Mr. President, dyan na nga napaway si Secretary Tagaywalo sa mga congressmen. Anyway,
Buti lang lang kayo.
sige na po, I will not belabor that issue
Mr.
anymore.
President, the USEC OIC was brought in by Secretary Taguiwalo, and he's continuing the very strict guidelines and standards of Secretary Judy.
Thank you. Anyway, that is all, and I'd like to thank the distinguished lady from Antique for being very patient and cooperative. Thank you.
Thank you to my Vice Chair, whose help, Mr. President, I could not do without in crafting a very good budget. Thank you. And I look forward to your interventions relating to Agno River System and others, Mr. President. Mag-break muna tayo.
Session suspended. Yung mga notes ko, iwan na lang muna dyan. Pero meron ka na. Plano. natin, official. Ang dami nila masyado eh, magla-lunch, ganyan. Hindi pwede yung 30 minutes. Punta tayo lang ang makakakain eh. Even an hour is not practical. Session is resumed.
Mr. President, the announcement made by the Senate President is that we will have a break daily between 12 and 2, and therefore I move to suspend the session until 2 o'clock this afternoon, Mr. President.
Okay, is there any objection? Hearing none, session is suspended and we will resume at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.